This program is part of American Graduate. Let's make it happen. A public media initiative made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
From the Discovery World Museum on Milwaukee's lakefront, this special presentation of American Graduate, Let's Make It Happen, Milwaukee, is a production of Milwaukee Public Television. Hello, everyone, and thank you so very much for joining us. I'm Dan Jones from Milwaukee Public Television. We are so glad you can be part of what really is going to be an important discussion. Our goal is pretty clear. Do what we can to make sure that more kids stay in school so they graduate from high school. The solution, well, that's not so clear and not so simple. You see, it's a huge problem across the country, around the state, right here in Milwaukee. Every year, more than 2,000 kids in Milwaukee middle and high schools drop out. The United Way here estimates that 40% of freshmen won't stick around until graduation. Now, you certainly don't start freshman year in high school thinking, hey, I'm going to quit before I'm done with this. So what happens, why does it happen, and what is being done about it? And is there really anything that the rest of us can do to offer any help? We've got a good group of people here to talk about it, so I'll introduce them right now. Dr. Heidi Ramirez is the well-respected and very influential Chief Academic Officer for Milwaukee Public Schools, brought in about a year and a half ago by the new superintendent to help turn things around. Pat Bridges is the co-director of Nova High, an MPS partnership school, which reaches out to at-risk kids. In a previous life, she was a longtime juvenile parole officer for the state of Wisconsin. Alan Borsick is a journalist with a great deal of experience covering the Milwaukee school scene. He recently retired from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, and now he works as a senior fellow in law and public policy at the Marquette University Law School. And Reggie Johnson dropped out of high school, then came to the Milwaukee Area Technical College to finish up in the adult high school program, where the pre-college classes offer a second chance for so many kids. Reggie did graduate, and now he's at MATC studying computer electronics, a difficult field. Okay, we're going to start our discussion in just a few minutes. And later on, we'll take some questions from an audience that is assembled here today. But first, I'd like you to watch a great story from longtime Milwaukee broadcast journalist Joanne Williams. Joanne talks with students who dropped out or came much too close to dropping out to find out exactly why.
The day we graduate from high school is supposed to be glorious, a day of cheers and tears and pride all around. You did it. You graduated. You got that diploma. But way too many teenagers in Milwaukee don't get to feel the joy of that day with their class. They don't graduate on time. They don't graduate from their original high school, or they just don't graduate at all. What are the reasons that kids stop working to get this? They are as varied as the kids. Everyone has a personal story, but there are some similarities woven through them all. These students at Project Stay are at risk of dropping out. They did drop out, but some have dropped back in. Here's why.
I clowned my first 2 years, and I didn't even take it serious until my junior year, because that's when it hit me.
So what did you do? Did you drop out?
Something like that. I just decided not to go, and I came here.
Did you drop out of school?
I did, but then again, I didn't. I was still enrolled. I just missed a lot of days. So I think it's technically I dropped out, but then again, I didn't drop out. So yeah, it's a lot.
I can't play no more. I'm 19 years old, and after 20, you can't go back and do it. Well, you can, but you can't get the real diploma that you really want. So I said I'm coming to stay this time.
Why do kids drop out?
They drop out because life intervenes. Life has a way of coming on people who don't expect it and don't have the tools of success to be able to overcome those scenarios, or the support system at home.
How old were you when you got pregnant?
I was 17 when I got pregnant.
So when you decided to drop out, what did you think?
I don't know what I was thinking. I was scared. I was just scared. I didn't want to have a baby. I didn't want to go to school. I didn't want to do anything.
These students at Nova, another school for kids at risk, said their neighborhoods and their home life stressed them out. Jarvis Bradford said his math teacher in his other high school just taught too fast. But in the end...
Was it the teachers or was it you?
Well, I can honestly say that it was me. It was actually the teachers too, but it was more me. I'm not gonna blame them because I didn't get good grades. I cared about other stuff at the time. School wasn't the #1 objective in my life.
And after thinking about it, Jalen Cross came to the same conclusion.
It was all me. I blame myself for my own mistakes, so it was me. But the teachers, they weren't really too much big help either.
All these students know they will be better off with a high school diploma. The analyses from the U.S. Census Bureau tells them so. In 2008, those without a high school diploma earned about $21,023 a year. With a diploma, $31,283. With a bachelor's degree, they earned an average of $58,613. 23-year-old Tony Howell graduated from Nova. He was never enthusiastic about school, but he knew he needed that diploma.
I knew I was going to graduate, regardless of if it was from here or from somewhere else. I knew I was going to graduate because that a high school diploma, that piece of paper is like step one in life.
But his 15-year-old sister Alex has yet to see the light.
Like, I want to be able to say I did it, and I know that it'll help me, but as of right now, I'm thinking that all I get's a piece of paper, which isn't how I'm supposed to feel, but I do.
When all your other friends graduated and some went on to college, how do you feel about that?
I was sad. I was real sad because that's what I always wanted. I always wanted to graduate and go away to a different state, to college, experience being away from family and stuff like that.
What do you think of your friends graduating and you not graduating?
I was upset because I wanted to graduate with them. It's hard because I was supposed to walk across the stage with you guys. That was supposed to be our day, our kind of bonding experience, and I didn't get to do it. I didn't even go to the graduation.
Is there hope for these kids?
There's always hope. Always. You can't give up. We've got to remember as adults, and I tell people all the time, we dropped the ball. We did. These are our children, and parents, teachers, community members, our government, we've dropped the ball with these kids, and that's why we have the mess that we have, because we didn't step in when we should have in order to turn around some of these children. That's just my opinion. I can't say, I'm not speaking for everyone, that's just my opinion. And I take part of that responsibility, and that's the reason why I've been here all these years.
When do you graduate?
Hopefully in June.
Are you going to graduate?
I think so, if I talk to my teachers, because I got to make up for some projects I missed. But my grades is good, though.
Proud of yourself?
Yeah, I'm proud of myself, because I had a 3-point here. I ain't never had a 3-point.
Man, it's hard out there. If you want to fool around, then you gonna be in chains. Trust me, I know a lot of people that done went through that stage. Go to school, get that education. That's the best thing to do right now. Get an education, because without that, you cannot make it.
All right, we have so much to talk about. Let's get right into it. As long as we were listening to the students there, Reggie, let me start with you. You told me that you went to Washington High School in Milwaukee for a few weeks, and you said, this is not for me, and you dropped out. Why?
Well, it was the environment. It's like you come in and every day either the teacher is dealing with something, and then that puts you in back, and then they don't have time for you and this and that. So say if there was an assignment I needed help on, I couldn't really get help from the teacher because they were too busy either dealing with another situation. I mean, you could never really, get through a class. So it was more a part of the environment that wasn't for me, because I never really got a chance to really understand what the teacher was talking about and things like that. So I said, you know what, maybe I need to just find another place. I mean, that environment might be okay for some people, but for me, it just didn't work out.
Pat, do we do enough to focus on the kids who need more attention?
You know, I think we're doing a lot more these days with the added entities that are coming from outside. We have people coming in from MPS who are specialists in literacy and in math, and they give us recipes to do things differently in the class. But the whole thing for me is, when do we stop expecting change? You know, that is a problem. When we stop expecting change, then we've given up. And we're doing what we can now, but there's a whole lot more that we should be doing.
Dr. Ramirez, MPS has a long history of being pretty sensitive to criticism. That's the way it is. Maybe that's the same for all big school systems. But when the communications director found out that all these PBS stations across the country were relying on this study that came out in 2009, which analyzed graduation figures for all the big cities from 2005 that showed Milwaukee had one of the lowest graduation rates in the country. She said, oh, it's not like that anymore. It's not 41% anymore. Our graduation rate has climbed to 67% in 2010, 2011. And I thought, well, that's a tremendous amount of growth if the same methodology was used. And then I thought, but is that what it's come to, that we're happy that it's 1 out of 3? We lose 1 out of 3 kids. Is that progress?
Well,
or is it?
I absolutely don't think any of us is happy with our graduation rate, but I want to make sure at least we know what kind of baseline we're looking at here. So we're at about 67%, which is certainly below a national average of or national rate of about 70%. But let's be clear, that's also well below the state average or state percent at about 86%. And the expectation that we have for our children, which is that every child will be a graduate and will graduate from high school on time, career and college ready. So no, we're not happy with it. We're working really hard on it. And to get there, in fact, it does mean that we need to be open to and get some meaningful critical feedback from our friends and colleagues and community partners, which I do think is a little different than criticism. I think that for us to continue to improve, we need folks who are really partners in helping us do that, who can be thoughtful with us, thought partners in that process, and help us think about the kinds of resources that we need to make sure every child, whether it's Reggie or students at Nova, really have an adult they can turn to. I mean, when we look at our data, it's not just the graduation rate that has us concerned. I look at students' own voice. We have half of our students saying they don't have an adult they feel like they can talk to. And in many cases, if you were someone in your building who could say, look, I'm struggling. I mean, the piece you just showed was fantastic. But when you asked students why did they drop out, it suggested there was a decision point. That one day they sat down and said, I'm going to drop out. And I think for many of our children, that's not how it happens. It just is a slow process. They stop going to school on time, they stop showing up, they stop performing, and there's no one there to catch them. There's no one there to say, hey, I got you. I noticed you weren't here. What's going on? What do you need? And that's a big piece of our work right now, is to not be focused just on the dropout rate, but rather who are the kids who are on that slide? And how do I get in there right now and get as many hands on deck to support them? And that's the kind of partners we need to help in that effort as well.
Alan, I've heard you say before, yeah, there's a great many reasons for the dropout rate, what's happening at home, the families are moving around a lot, poverty, whatever, but we have to deal with what's happening in the school because that's where we can control things. Now, the other day I mentioned to a very good friend of mine who's an MPS teacher that we were doing this program, and she said, hey, don't blame us for that problem too. It's not the teacher's fault. We can't teach them if their butts aren't in the chairs. Pretty good statement.
Well, true, and I think it's important that students themselves not be let off the hook. You do have a responsibility for your own future and your own education. I thought in the segment that Joanne did, when she asked a couple of the students or the young people, was it your fault or is it your teacher's fault? I think if they were being honest, and at least one of them was, it's their fault. My wife was a high school teacher. You really only had to try in her class to pass it. But she had kids who just absolutely didn't try. Is that her fault? it's primarily the kids' fault. But you can't let the schools off the hook either, because there are things that schools can do. There are schools that are doing better than others. There are systems that are doing better than Milwaukee's, and by Milwaukee's I mean not only MPS, but the whole system of schools here, charters, vouchers, you name it. So you can't take a pass on anybody. You know, the subtitle of this project is Let's Make It Happen. Well, it's very important that it's an us. And it starts with the schools, because that's the place to focus on. That's where the kids are supposed to be. But it is everybody. It's the willpower of the entire community. It's the family situations, which for so many of the kids are so awful. It's the kids themselves. But it's not improper to focus on the schools. I wouldn't, if a teacher told me it's not my fault, I would have a problem with that. Because a teacher, you know, if you're not succeeding, you need to challenge yourself, say, what can I do better? Well, some kids' the answer is going to be nothing. With a lot more kids than now, the answer is something.
Let's talk for just a few minutes about the reasons for the dropout problem. Why is it different now than it was in 1950 or 1960? Is it because the family's breaking up? Is there more poverty? Are people moving from neighborhood to neighborhood, job to job, 5 times a year?
Is there a D, all of the above?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
I think certainly the breakdown of the American family, you know, is an issue here. I mean, this goes back to students not having adults to talk to and having a support system. So we can debate whether that's because we have more single-parent families, you know, churches that are not quite as active in the community as they have been historically. There are a variety of factors. I think the reality is we have fewer adults focused on individual children and being able to sort of provide a support system in the same way that we had before. And likewise, there are a lot more and interesting distractions for kids too. You know, if we, you know, are we as school systems making our classrooms as engaging as being at home? For many of our kids, they live a digital life. They're on the phone, they're playing video games, they're doing 10 things at once. The music is great, and in many cases, while the motivation to be in high school may not be as strong as it was in the 50s, a lot of our classrooms do still look like the 50s. And so what are we doing to make sure our classrooms are engaging as well? So I think it's both about what's going on outside of school in terms of the community support, family support, and what are we doing inside of school, both on the support side, as well as the academic rigor and engagement side. For a lot of our students who are saying they're bored.
Reggie, if you could run a high school, how would you do it differently? What would you do differently to make it more interesting and engaging, and a high school that would keep you and your friends there?
Well, you know, you just make it organized. I mean, you know, have teachers that, you know, will be there for you, be honest, and not, you know, quick to say, okay, well, you missed this and missed that, well, I'm going to fail you. Just try to at least show some love and compassion and just work with the student. And then if you see that, you know, you've done what you can do, and, you know, they still, you know, still on that mind to say, well, I'm not going to come or do this, then try to linger it and talk to the parents and get them to talk to them. Because sometimes I believe you should have a motivational class. You need motivation around you to keep you going. You can't just, you know, just have just a class. You want motivation, you want love, you want, you know, to feel welcome in that environment, and make sure that the people around you also feel welcome.
Alan, realistically, do you think it's possible to run a great public school system in a big urban area in the United States, whether that be Milwaukee, Chicago, New York, Philadelphia? Is it possible, or is it the nature of the beast now that it's going to be, some schools are going to be chaotic?
Is it possible? I'd say yes. Is it happening anywhere in the country? In reality, no, everyone's struggling. Every urban area has major issues like this. I would say some are doing better than the Milwaukee area, and then Milwaukee Public Schools, which means at minimum, I think Milwaukee needs to aim to get up to the level of some of those other places. That why are we worse than other places? I don't know the answer to that, except we need to keep struggling to find answers. Are these problems going to be solved with perfect solutions? No, I don't think so. A lot of kids have, like I say, just enormous baggage they carry around. Let me go back, though, to your question about the 1950s. I don't have the figures in front of me, and for the 50s, I'm not sure. But if you go back to the 40s and 30s, for sure, the graduation rates today are way better than in that era. I think even for the 50s. The difference is, in the 30s, 40s, 50s, even in the Depression of the 30s, you didn't need a high school diploma the way you need it now. In fact, you need more than a high school diploma. Almost all the major employers that I can think of, except for really low-paying jobs, are looking for 2-year or 4-year completion beyond high school. In the 30s, you could walk into an A.O. Smith or a Briggs & Stratton or Alice Chalmers and make a living on your back. These days, that's not the case. Nobody's going to make a living without that high school diploma. So it isn't so much that the statistics have necessarily changed, it's that the realities of what's needed to make it in life have changed. And then you do add in the fact that you also didn't have the disintegration of the family at that time that we have now. Nonetheless, on a certain level, graduation rates have gotten better. The needs have gotten much more demanding, and we're not doing a good job of meeting those needs.
Pat, this is going to sound insensitive, but I'll ask it anyway. I'm walking through a shopping center the other day, and I'm listening to this group of teenagers talk, and I'm thinking to myself, there is no way that they are smart enough to get through a high school English class, much less biology, chemistry. Are kids today smart enough to handle the curriculum that is being placed in front of them?
Of course they are. And they may not have been smart enough at that time from what you heard, but see, our kids are smart. They're smart overall. They have the lingo to talk with their peers, their friends, and when they sit down and talk to me as a principal, they know how to address me as the principal. See, the thing about it is with our kids, you know, I'm sitting here and I'm hearing all this stuff, and I think we forgot one thing. One very important thing is the family. The teaching starts at home. And if until we can come to grips with ourselves, with our kids, you know, okay, I don't care if you're poor or on W-2 or a crack addict or whatever it is. You know, we need to make sure that our kids get to school. We need to make sure that our kids are educated. You know, you come to Nova, at any given day, there's kids there with problems. They come in with problems. You know, I used to tell them, look, you're late, you can't eat breakfast, but I don't know if those kids have eaten the night before. So I have to take time out, just like the young man said. You know, we need some time where we need to call all the kids together. I call it a lifelong lesson session. And I ask the kids, what's going on in your life? What do you want to talk about today? And you will be surprised at the things that come out of these kids' mouth. Yeah, they can do whatever it takes for them to make it in society. But when you get out in the real world, the kids really don't have a clue. But that's what we're for. That's what we're for. We're in these schools to teach them the basics. And that's what we have to do with our kids. We have to go back to the basics because a lot of these things they don't understand.
You could do that at a school the size of Nova, but when you have a district with 80,000, 90,000 kids, can you give them the love and attention that they might be missing at home? Is that possible?
I think that certainly with our partners in a community, absolutely. I mean, your question about are students smart enough takes me aback a little bit. Absolutely, our students are smart enough. Are our expectations high enough, and are we as a community committed enough? That's the real question here. Our students are incredibly capable. I mean, we know they're resilient. We have kids who are coming to school despite incredible odds. The question is, are we willing to organize all of our resources, particularly as a city of Milwaukee, not just Milwaukee Public Schools, to organize ourselves to support every child, or are we going to continue Milwaukee's history of fighting over organizational structures and fighting over who owns what, as opposed to who owns the piece of the responsibility here, and what am I going to do to help make a difference in the lives of children? That's not a conversation I've really heard widespread in Milwaukee since I've been here.
Alan, you've watched Milwaukee schools for decades, administration after administration.
I'm so old.
Do you see positive changes happening right now, or do you just see another administration? And can you blame the administration if it's not changing, and can you give them credit if it is?
Frankly, in terms of the current MPS administration, Superintendent Gregory Thornton, it's too early to tell. They're doing some initiatives that I mean, I'm always an optimist, despite what people might say about me. So I hope the literacy initiative they're doing will work out great. I hope the Math and Science Initiative, which is getting into place gradually now, it will turn out great. I hope everything turns out great. Have I seen change? You know, I'll tell you, across the decade of 2000 to 2010, roughly, the MPS graduation rate went up quite substantially, as you were saying at the start. It was, as a whole, around 50%. It went up to almost 70%. You could have a whole hour program here on how to calculate high school graduation rates. But there really was an improvement. There was no improvement in that period of, in the state test scores for 10th graders, the ACT college entrance tests, overall in attendance. Only in the last couple of years has there been an improvement in suspensions, and frankly it's debatable as to whether that's just because we're not suspending kids anymore or because there's actually an improvement in academic atmosphere. There wasn't an improvement in rigor. The Beatles, I hate to say this, but the Beatles were wrong. The Beatles said all you need is love. And you hear so much when you have conversations like this, the kids need love, the kids need warmth, the kids need an adult who really listens to them. All of that is true, but they need more than that. It's not all you need. You need a rigorous program, you need a responsive program, you need a program that challenges itself, a school that challenges itself and teachers who challenge themselves at every point along the way to do better. And that sense of challenging ourselves to do better within schools, that hasn't really increased in Milwaukee. In some individual schools, yes. Across the waterfront, I don't think so.
All right,
Can I follow up here, Dan?
Sure.
I mean, I think Alan's bringing up some good points here, but certainly change in a district of 80,000 students takes some time, but I do think there are some really good positive early signs here. We look at student attendance. Student attendance has gone up what looks like about 2 to 3 percentage points this past year. Again, for 80,000 kids to move up 3 percentage points, that's pretty significant. And that's the highest rate in 15 years as a district. I mean, that's partly because some of it's love, some of it's getting on the phone, going door to door, saying to parents and kids, we need to be here. We need you here to make it happen. Suspensions absolutely are down probably about 36% over the last year. And at a time when we're making our schools more safe. So it's not just, we're not suspending kids. We're really looking at a whole variety of strategies to make sure students are more engaged and supported when they're in buildings. And those are sort of, early indicators. That gets the kids there. Together, those two things mean we probably retrieved about 40,000 school days for kids. Now, to your question, right, what do we do now that they're there in terms of ensuring rigor? Well, we've got a little bit of a bump in early reading scores in the WKCE. If you look at the ACT data this year, again, this is sort of the one metric we have that actually looks at us, having been here on the job, if you will, for a good amount of time because it's a spring assessment. While our ACT data are certainly well behind the state, this is the first time since 2007 that scores have gone up in MPS, and they've gone up in every content area but one. And in every one of those content areas, the growth has outpaced the state. I think that's a good sign that we've got a few good things really focusing on that are starting to take hold. But again, when you're trying to work 80,000 kids, and the kind of poverty and challenges, whether they're language or disability that we're working on, a little support and a little community involvement, and I think some patience. And yes, we got to keep dialing it up a couple notches, absolutely. And it's an ongoing challenge for us as a system, sort of how fast do you go? You keep turning up the stove a little higher because we need to. We started this by asking, is 67% an okay number? Absolutely not. The question is, how fast can we get to 100% in a system like ours? And we're trying to figure that out every day, sort of how fast to go.
Now, I promised if a member of the audience had a question, we'd take it, and they do.
My name is Francisco Urbina. I'm a parent, but I'm also an educator. I have 2 young people that graduated from High School of the Arts, MPS school. Over the years, I've been told that if MPS focuses more on the negatives, they get more money. I find that, terrible, because I really think that we also need to focus on the positive things that MPS has done. My son graduated from Chicago, the University of Chicago in Hyde Park. My daughter graduated early from UW-Madison. So should the MPS district and other institutions be looking at the positive things also? This is addressed to Dr. Heidi Ramirez, but anybody else can add comments to it. Thank you.
I think absolutely we have to be looking at the positive. I do think it's real easy to sort of look at what's not working and in many cases to give up hope, but I think we need to set really high expectations for our students and for the system and then really track the successful milestones along the way. And likewise, when we're not meeting those milestones, when we're not hitting the positives, taking a look and being critical of ourselves and with our colleagues to figure out, do we need to do something different? But I'm always happy to celebrate the small wins. I'd like some bigger wins, and we're certainly working toward those. But we're doing what we can, and congratulations, that's a lot to achieve. That I'd like to say it has to do with Milwaukee High School of the Arts as well as a good family and a community system.
Somebody mentioned the safety issue before. Can we touch on that? Not meaning to be negative, but that is a much bigger issue than it was decades ago, right? Where a lot of parents are afraid to send their kids to school if they have to worry about the child's safety. Is enough being done to address that issue? I read all the time about schools having to fight to get the money to have a security officer in the school.
Well, I think that there are ongoing safety challenges, school climate, and it's certainly true that that's become more of a focus for folks. In fact, we've actually had to take a little bit of a step back as a district because so much of our own language and attention around school climate was really about school safety. And having to remind all of ourselves as educators that school climate is bigger than that it is not just sort of the scanner at the front gate, but also making sure there's a climate that is really conducive to learning, where there's a strong culture of rapport and respect among students, between students and adults, and among adults as well. So I think broadening our notion of what school climate is, frankly, it helps get to a much more preventative approach to thinking about school safety, and also helps move the dial for us around really ensuring that students are learning, that students are engaged, that the focus is, in fact, as Reggie sort of suggested, on the student and the teaching and the learning, and not all the distractors that can exist in the environment.
Okay. Well, we're going to get back to our discussion in just a few minutes. We've already pointed out the tremendous challenges faced by any big urban school system. There's poverty, homelessness, behavioral issues, a great number of kids with learning disabilities, and it gets even more complicated when you add all the different minority populations that they have very separate and distinct language and cultural issues. Let's watch this interesting story from Satora Takanayev.
What did John Cabot find instead? He didn't find a way to get to Asia, but what did he find?
Here in Bruce Guadalupe Middle School, students seem to enjoy the learning process and concentrate on their work. High school graduation rate for these students is 95 to 98%.
What we do is high school tracking. So once they graduate from Bruce Guadalupe at the 8th grade, we'll track them throughout their 4 years in high school and assist them with the college application process.
This school has high parent participation rate, and overall Latino students thrive and do good here, which is often the case for charter and Catholic schools.
Get our gingerbread to run away. We don't want our gingerbread man to run away.
So if a Hispanic student made it past waiting lists or received a voucher to attend a Catholic school, he's considered lucky. He has more chances to graduate and go on to college. But what happens to the majority of Latino students in Wisconsin?
The graduation rate for white students is about 90% statewide. For Hispanics, statewide is 69%. And the graduation rate for Hispanics is lower in Milwaukee. The number is only 59%.
The picture is not very promising for the future workforce of our state. Furthermore, Professor Tapia estimates that only 10 out of 100 Hispanic students in MPS will graduate from high school to go on to college.
There are two major factors that explain the lower academic achievement of Hispanic students. Number one, on the average, the level of education of Hispanic parents is lower. Whitefish Bay, we had the parents with 65% with a college degree or higher, while it's only 5.2% in the Hispanic community. But what's more important are the ACT scores. These are the scores that tell us if the students are ready to be successful to do college level work.
I think the big mistake that happens is when people think that college readiness happens at junior year, and it's just way too late. Whether it's ACT, getting ready for those tests, it's really what happened way before that.
When we look at the differences from 4th grade to 8th grade and to the 10th grade, the achievement gap actually increases. The schools are not very accommodating to the specific cultural and linguistic needs of Hispanic students.
I work with people. I get to interact with them. Most importantly, I make them beautiful.
Madeline is a hairstylist and also manages 2 salons. She's a beautiful, smart, goal-oriented young woman and a mother to 2 children. Now, it's hard to believe that someone like Madeline would make a choice to drop out of high school, but she did.
I wish I would have been able to be a high school child or a teenager going to games and just worrying about school. I found a job maybe when I was like 15 or 16. I wanted to make some type of income versus just go to school. That was something in my household that was a little bit short from coming from a single mother. And I wanted to help or just know that I can provide a couple of things for myself. And I was focusing more on my job than school and just said I can go back to school later on.
When the young kid find themselves in an environment that is not all that receptive, they begin to withdraw. And by the time they get to the high school, they see that it's going to be very difficult for them to graduate. We refer to this as the push-out rate, not as a high school dropout rate. So on the one hand, there's an economic need in the family. And on the other hand, you have an educational setting that is not very supportive.
The support of the culture is directly connected to parents' participation in their kids' education. A lot of times, new immigrants, besides having a language barrier, simply can't navigate school systems in the U.S. It turns out they don't know what is best for their children.
Mother, she just saw me working slowly. I was being taken away from my school. She was very upset, but at the same time, you know, she was glad that I was doing something which was working. She wasn't firm on it. And so along the way, she must have gave up, you know, and that's where I just, you know, continued to work and didn't finish high school.
Perhaps Madeline's mom would be able to help her daughter if she was persistent and firm. But a lot of times, the level of influence that Latino parents have on their children is defined by the outside factor.
When the parents have to talk to education authorities, social welfare authorities, or other authorities, they rely often on the children to provide the translation for them. And this is a role reversal with respect to authority.
Latino students from low-income families don't get the same head start as middle-class American students. They don't have generations of educated parents behind them, and their parents simply can't provide them with the same support and knowledge. Therefore, the role of the schools in urban, ethnically diverse districts is critical.
Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel ran a story about wasteful spending inside the district. $103 million per year. Money that could be better used. To me, it's very sad. Some of my students now are working in the public schools here in Milwaukee, and I get emails from them. They are worried. They have to put up their classrooms up for adoption. Milwaukee Public School system does not provide a quality education to all students. There are some good schools there, but most of them are not doing a very good job. We have liked for the teachers union to have taken a more proactive role in looking for the well-being of the children. At the present moment, a teacher's salary is based how long they have been working and how many credit hours they have above a bachelor's degree. It is not based on the quality of the teacher. As such, we need to transform the whole education system, the way teachers are paid, so that we can recruit the most competent and the most hardworking educators to work in the most challenging schools.
The education reform ultimately will need to involve more than just schools. The entire community, government officials, college professors, nonprofit organizations, and everyone who is invested in the future of the minority students will have to step in and become a part of the process.
The demographic here in Milwaukee, which is our largest school district in the state, is very much reflective of what the future workforce in Wisconsin is going to look like. And we need to dramatically improve the success rates of that demographic.
Today, MPS and their partners Great Lakes Education found a new way to bring college in perspective for students in South Division High School.
You just found out that Great Lakes is giving everyone in the room $12,000. So let's give it up for Great Lakes.
Students learned that they are all eligible for a significant investment in them. That is $12,000 of college scholarship money if they graduate on time, maintain at least a 2.5 GPA, and maintain at least 90% attendance rate overall. Team Up College Access and College Access Starts Now is part of a larger initiative in Milwaukee Public Schools to get students and families thinking as early as elementary school about their futures and about the importance of college and getting ready for it.
Giving rise to the expectation that they can go to college, that they can succeed, is really one of the critical elements of these kinds of interventions. Once they now can expect that college is a possibility for them, the likelihood of success is that much higher.
If Madeline was given the same chance as some students today in South Division High School, maybe she would take that chance and use it. Maybe she wouldn't have to take a long way around to reach her goals.
Once you're 20 and you do want a more decent pay, definitely the first thing that is on there is, do you have your GED or high school diploma? And once I had my son, then I really found myself in a more difficult situation because the jobs and the income that I was used to was not going to be enough. I had to sit down and brainstorm what was I going to do. That's where I came about this career. You could go to school as an apprenticeship, and I also was going for my GED at METC. It took up a lot of my time, but still I was able to manage and do that.
And she wants her children to do even better.
They're 8 years old, and I have another daughter who's 5, and I'm constantly talking about college with them. So they already know that that's something that is in their future, that they have to do. There's no other way, you know?
All right, let's talk about some sensitive issues that Satora touched on in that piece. Alan, if there's going to be change in any public school district, there has to be cooperation and engagement between the union and the administration. Is that always a tough one, or do we just assume it's always going to be adversarial?
Well, I don't assume it's going to be adversarial because I don't assume the union's going to exist after a year and a half from now under Act 10. That's not to say I'm endorsing or criticizing the state legislation that stripped unions of almost all their powers, but it's going to be a whole different reality. In MPS, the clock really doesn't start until July 1st, 2013, and almost every other school district in the state it's already true. The unions just don't have the power they had before. The contracts don't have the power they had before. Maybe that's good news in that it creates a much freer hand for administration. It also puts the pressure on everybody, especially the administration, the principals. I think more than ever the quality of a principal of a school was really important, to say, I don't have excuses. It's time to take action to produce a better education and a better educational environment in this school. So I think the union excuse, for better or worse, is running out of steam.
Pat, I think it's important for people to realize, too, that all the different populations that schools have to deal with now creates so many more challenges. As Satora pointed out in her piece, okay, you have the Latino population, and there are cultural differences there that the teacher may or not be familiar with, but those same differences, or different kind of differences, must exist with the Hmong population, with the Arab American population. How can we expect schools to deal with all these different cultural inequities?
Well, I think schools just need to step up to the plate and see what the kids need. The expectations have to be set. And if you have kids that don't have any expectations, you've lost the battle right there. When the kids come into the school and you introduce to the kids what you're offering at the school, then you set the expectations of what you want the kids to achieve at the school. And if the standards are not set high, they don't have anything to reach for. They're already used to mediocrity. So if you can't set the expectations high, I don't care what culture it is, if you can't set the expectations high and really, really believe that the kids can reach those expectations, then you've lost the battle.
Reggie, how much more enjoyable would high school have been for you, and middle school and grade school, if you didn't always have the worry on your mind, I want to go to college, but how am I going to pay for that?
Well, yeah, it would have been enjoyable, but at the same time, you still have to, pay for college. But yeah, having said that, yeah, without that being on my mind, it probably would have been enjoyable, and mostly, the environment and having teachers that are, willing to work with me and things like that. I mean, that's one part that I mostly lost, where teachers never really had time to work with me because they were too busy dealing with students or conflicts or meetings and things like that. That's what mostly got in the way with me. So I said, well, okay, then I'll just try to do this on my own, and unfortunately that didn't work too well, so I guess I just had to move on and find something.
Was it less of a worry when you got to the technical college?
Well, when I went in, I was a little bit worried, even though it was adult high school, because when you've been around something that long, you get kind of in the frame of mind, well, okay, if MPS has been like this, who's to say adult high school was any different? It's just adult high school, but it's still at a college. Well, the teachers could be the same, but when I got in there, I was very satisfied with the teachers. I mean, they were willing to work with me until I got it right. They were able to stay after, and that was one of the most things I really needed, to be successful, because that's where I lost most of my courage. When teachers don't have time to work with me, I'm like, well, I won't be able to, pass and do this and that. I'll just be sitting in there being confused, and then when the final comes, I just drop out from it. I never really showed up for the final, even though it was there, and they would call and I wouldn't answer the phone, and I'm like, no, I don't want to come in if I don't understand the material.
Dr. Ramirez, I've been here most of my life. I do not recall an administration for the Milwaukee Public School System that ever reached out as much as this one is reaching out to the business community, and to get partnerships with the business community, and the business community seems to be reaching back. Why is that important? Well, I mean, if MPS, and I'm not being negative, if MPS fails, why is that important to the business community or for communities outside of Milwaukee?
Well, certainly in a city like ours, the future of the economic development, sort of a global city, all of this depends in large part on the kind of workforce and citizenry we can help develop. So I certainly see it as an interest of the business community. From a school district, absolutely, we know we need to engage as many partners as possible. I mean, we have great partners. I see in the audience from City Year. I know we've got the Boys and Girls Club, and the clip you showed a minute ago was a great partnership with Great Lakes Education Corps. It all goes back to, I think, what Reggie and Pat and Alan have been describing is that there is not a silver bullet here. That we need to set high expectations for children. We need to provide lots of socio-emotional support, academic rigor and academic support. We need to keep an eye on kids to know when they're slipping so that we can actually intervene early. We need to provide incentives to help them understand there are real possibilities, potential for you later on. And that's the beauty of the Promise scholarships, to know as a 9th grader, pretty much all of the costs of college will be covered for you if you stay the course. I mean, all of this is about wrapping around as much support and its love, its expectations, its academic rigor. And to do that, it requires the support of community volunteers, whether they're retired folks or GE Healthcare, who provides us a huge number of volunteers in our classrooms and schools, business partners who are investing in us, whether it's in scholarships or, again, resources to the buildings. This is a city that we all know is 4th poorest of the cities of its size in the country. We cannot do it alone. I really, truly believe we have an incredibly dedicated workforce in Milwaukee Public Schools. Despite all the cultural variation of our students, I do not believe there's a group out there that does not want the best for their children. But we have some resource challenges. We have some real challenges among us. So yes, we're reaching out to the business community, to the different faith communities, to the unions. There isn't a group we're not going to talk to if we think they can help us ensure every child achieves to high standards. I'm not too proud to beg.
All right, I'm told we have another question. Why don't we take that now?
Hello, my name is Luke Fickbaum. I serve as City of Milwaukee. Dr. Ramirez, many of our students, many of Milwaukee Public Schools students come in at the classroom at different levels, different academic levels. How can we structure the classroom so the teachers can reach all the different students in their classroom and get them up to grade level?
It's a really good question. It's both about students coming in at different levels and teachers having different skill sets to manage that. So one, I'd say we need to make sure everybody has high expectations. That's the family, the student, and these teachers. Then inside of what we call core instruction. So if you're a ninth grader, you should have access to ninth grade content. It doesn't mean that you don't have to, as a teacher, really differentiate that content, but it's not dumbing down. And I think oftentimes people mistake that sort of, oh, I have to start here because my students are struggling. No, I need to make sure I provide a lot more scaffolding for my students. So a big piece of this is making sure each teacher has the knowledge and skills and motivation and support to, in fact, support kids who are behind to be able to accomplish grade level work. Now the reality is it can't all happen then in that classroom. If a kid is coming in that far behind, we need to provide what we call supplemental or sort of tier 2 support. So that's where knowing early, diagnosing early who are the students who need more targeted support and providing that, particularly in reading and math. So we're doing a lot more of that as a district, targeted intervention, whether that's 20 to 30 minutes every day or 3 to 5 times a week. So working on that. And again, that requires some intensive support from teachers. And then there are students who still need another level of support. And then I would say there's also where the community supports some of this work. So having additional reading volunteers, folks who are in after-school programs, and for many of our students, credit recovery. We have about 700 of our students district-wide who are now in about 18 high schools working after school to indeed catch up, if you will. And we have likewise students who are at risk of dropping out who are in what we call GED Option 2 programs. Both of these enlist online supports. So to ask a teacher to know how to differentiate for 25 different reading levels in a classroom and not provide some support for that. So oftentimes the technology both helps because teachers can't necessarily do all this work alone, but also our students in many ways are more actively engaged with some of the online and virtual learning environments we can create for them.
This initiative is pushing high school graduation, but let's take it one step further. That's right. That's not a guarantee of anything anymore, is it, Pat? So you tell your kid, okay, we want you to graduate from high school. Well, then what? Are you pushing them to go to a trade and technical school? Are you pushing them to go to a 4-year college? Or is a high school diploma good enough?
No, it's not good enough. And the first thing that, like one of the students said on the piece you ran, the kids have to be intrinsically motivated. It has to start with them. You know, the parents can get them up at 5 o'clock in the morning to be at school at 7. If the kid don't get out of the bed and get to school prepared, ready to get whatever the teacher is presenting that day, then we've lost the battle again. We have to make sure that the kid wake up to the fact that we're doing it for you. We're doing everything that we can do to help you get to where you want to be. A high school diploma is not enough. It's a start, it's a step, but it's not enough. I mean, like Mr. Borzak said earlier about, you know, back in the 30s when graduation rates were lower. I mean, you can go to McDonald's and get a job without a high school diploma. We've seen the numbers as far as what you would make with a high school diploma, without a high school diploma, and with a BS degree or a bachelor's degree. We need to make sure that these kids know that this is the start, and we have to start somewhere.
Alan, 30 seconds. Can a teacher, can a school district motivate a kid, or does that happen in the home?
The 30-second answer, it's obviously best if it comes from the home. The correlation between a child's ultimate educational success and the mother's success in her earlier days is very, very high. But that said, yes, schools can make a difference. That's why some schools are having more success than others with the same kids. So yes, yes to both. The home makes a difference, but the school can and should make a difference, even with the kids who are neediest.
All right. Well, that was a great discussion, but we're running out of time, so we have to wrap things up. Honestly, it's a discussion that could go on for hours, days, weeks, months, and it should, because there is so much at stake here. Lives, dreams, hopes, families, school systems, entire communities. It's in the best interest of everyone to continue looking for honest answers, to continue addressing the problems, and to continue demanding that there are resources available so that the problems can be addressed and in the most cost-effective and measurable ways. Thank you so very much to our panel members for their time, their opinions, their expertise, and thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. On behalf of all of us at Milwaukee Public TV, enjoy the rest of your evening.
This program is part of American Graduate. Let's make it happen. A public media initiative made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.